Hi, this is Sav,
Katie,
and Caitlin
from The Accidentals. You're listening to your morning coffee podcast with our friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Weekly music news for the new music business.
From Tim Ingham at Music Business Worldwide, Suno Inc.'s global licensing deal with BMG ahead of launching new music model.
And from Elizabeth Diltz Marshall at Billboard, global recorded music retail revenue to top $121 billion by 2033, Media Report says.
And from Murray Stassen at Music Business Worldwide, Spotify to label AI artists with new AI persona badge and keep their music out of recommendations by default. Sam Duboff, Spotify's global head of music policy, breaks it all down for us.
And from Steve Knopper for the Wall Street Journal, the illegal sellers costing musicians millions in revenue. And Steve Knopper joins us to explain what it all means. So all of this and the Your Morning Coffee podcast tops the list of 10 music business podcasts you should be listening to right now. But thankfully, you are listening to us right now. So we're going to start the show right now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Well, good to see you, Jay.
Good
a lovely
morning.
day here in Southern California.
Yes.
Not quite so hot. Not quite so hot.
Every day above ground is a good day, my friend. You mentioned in the intro the Hypebot editorial team. They had a story, 10 music business podcasts you should be listening to right now. And we were at the top of that list, and we were very appreciative of the kind words. And, they said that these are the podcasts that help artists and industry professionals make sense of the industry news, career strategy, marketing, technology, rights, and economics issues of the day.
Well, Jay, again, an honor to be on that list. And I was looking and counting. In the last 6 years, we have done 377 episodes. That's 62 special episodes and 315 regular episodes. And no wonder my tonsils hurt. My goodness, it's been a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's gone by fast. And today is actually our 6-year anniversary. So happy anniversary, my friend.
Indeed. It's been a pleasure and an honor. And it's still really, really fun. And as we were saying before we started, too, it is interesting to see how things have ramped up just in the last year. And it just seems so busy. And we're happy to chat about it every week.
Yeah, and we're thrilled to be on this Hypebot list, along with a lot of our friends. There are a lot of other great podcasts that we listen to on this list.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So we were number 1, and number 2 was the New Music Business with Ari Herstand. Musician and author Ari Herstand talks with artists, executives, managers, and marketers about how careers are actually built today, covering topics like influencer marketing and direct-to-fan campaigns.
Yeah, another favorite, number 3 on this list. Our friend Dan Runcie takes, sort of a business strategist lens to music, digging into hip hop's major companies, catalog investments, streaming economics, and AI.
And we love Trapital, and we also love The Price of Music, produced by Music Ally and hosted by Stuart Dredge and Joe Sparrow. The show breaks down the financial side of the week's biggest industry stories in accessible terms.
Yeah, number 5 on this list was a podcast I was on for 10 years and probably 500-600 episodes with my friend Michael Brandvold. He now does it with Blasco, and that's a long-running show that's turning current industry news and into practical, actionable conversations for working artists.
And number 6 on the list is Music Tectonics. Host Dimitri Vitsa focuses on the technology reshaping how music is created, distributed, licensed, and monetized, often featuring startup founders and investors. Another good one.
Yep, another good one. Number 7, The Future of What? And that's created by Music Business Association President Portia Sabin. And that brings industry leaders together to discuss the business, where it's heading, including legislation, AI rights, diversity, and much more.
Indeed. Number 8 on the list is Music Business Insider Podcast. It's hosted by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight on Mubu TV, offering long-form career education-focused conversations across A&R, management, publicity, touring, and more.
Number 9 on this list, the Bob Lefsetz Podcast. Bob brings strong opinions, of course, and long-form interviews with artists, agents, promoters, executives, and, really talks about his institutional industry knowledge.
Yep, and number 10 is the business side of music. That focuses on the practical machinery of a sustainable music career, rights ownership, distribution, and artist development through conversations with working musicians and pros. So a lovely list and stuff we've listened to ourselves, and really proud to be on that list.
Yeah.
And before we get rolling, Jay, I say we thank our sponsors. Support for the show comes from Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. Founded by Bruce Houghton, Hypebot is edited by touring artist and publisher Jeremy Young and supported by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
That's right. Support for the show comes from Bands in Town. Now over 100 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist services platform, and it connects over 700,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates to music fans across all platforms.
Yes, indeed. And for 377 episodes, I've got to hang out with this guy, Jay Gilbert, music business consultant, educator, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups.
That's crazy. 6 years, 377 episodes. That's a lot. But I get to do it every week with my good friend Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group. So let's jump into the story, shall we?
Yes, we shall.
The first one from Tim Ingham at Music Business Worldwide. The headline, Suno Inc.'s global licensing deal with BMG ahead of launching new music models. So Suno signed a global licensing deal with BMG, becoming just the second major rights holder to strike a deal with the AI music platform.
Yeah, Suno and BMG announced a global licensing agreement covering BMG's recorded and publishing catalogs, which represents over 3 million songs from artists like will.i.am, Tina Turner, Jason Aldean, and Jelly Roll. The deal is an opt-in for BMG artists and songwriters and settles prior unlicensed use of BMG's music by Suno.
That's right. This makes BMG the first major rights holder to sign with Suno since Warner Music Group's deal 9 months ago. Universal and Sony remain locked in active infringement litigation against Suno. The news lands the same week that Suno announced download restrictions and new watermarking fingerprinting tech, which we'll cover in a minute. And just weeks after Suno lost a court fight to German collection society GEMA in Munich.
Yeah, this is a clear signal of a two-track industry response to AI music. WMG and now BMG are choosing negotiated licensing deals while UMG and Sony continue litigating. With BMG's Concord merger closing in Q4, that's adding about 125,000 or more artists to the roster. This deal's footprint is about to get a lot bigger. For labels and artists watching from the sidelines, it's another clue about whether opt-in licensing becomes the industry norm or a minority position.
That's right. 2 majors down, 2 to go. Warner Music Group and now BMG have picked the licensing lane, which makes UMG and Sony's litigation stance look more and more like the outlier.
The Concord merger closing in Q4 could be the real story here. This deal's footprint is about to jump by 125,000 artists overnight.
Right, and sort of keep your eye on the opt-in language. Opt-in sounds artist-friendly, but it also means BMG's roster has to actively choose to opt in.
Interesting. And as a related story, our next story, it's also by Tim Ingham for Music Business Worldwide. Suno limits pro subscribers to 20 song downloads per month while promising new models developed in partnership with the music industry. So from September 3rd, Suno's $8 to $10 a month pro tier drops from unlimited downloads to just 20 downloads a month. Premier subscribers, they're spending about $24 to $30 a month, go from unlimited to 60 monthly downloads. Those studio users keep unlimited exports.
Yeah, and free users get capped at 7 downloads total, a lifetime limit for personal use only, no commercial, no streaming use allowed. Suno says the move targets mass exporters, gaming, streaming royalties, and it's rolling out watermarking, fingerprinting technology to detect stream rippers and really to enforce the caps.
So is a direct throttle on the fraud factory problem, bulk-generated AI tracks flooding DSPs in an attempt to game the system and farm royalties, which is exactly the abuse pattern labels and rights holders have been pushing platforms to close off. It's also a concrete signal of what post-settlement AI licensing terms could actually look like in practice.
Yeah, Suno framed it as ensuring the platform is, quote, used for intentional music creation while still allowing everyone to create, remix, listen, and share on Suno, end quote.
Right. Suno keeping downloads, unlike Udio, which cut them off completely after its UMG deal. This has been a major hurdle.
Yeah, and watermarking, fingerprinting piece, that part is the labels, it's what they actually care about long term. So big news this week from Suno and BMG. Our next story is also a big story, and it's from Elizabeth Diltz Marshall from Billboard. And the headline is Global Recorded Music Retail Revenue to Top $121 billion by 2033. And that's according to a Media report. So Media's new global music forecast, that's 2026 through 2033, that says that global recorded music will grow 63% by 2033, with quote-unquote expanded rights, think merch, touring, and branding, becoming the industry's second biggest growth engine after streaming.
Yeah, Media released this report on August 13th, projecting global recorded music revenue will climb from $74.3 billion in 2025 to $121.1 billion by 2033. Streaming stays the primary growth driver, but expanded rights, labels' cut of branding, merch, and live events are pegged as the second fastest growing category.
Yeah, Media puts the fan economy at a projected $18.5 billion by 2033. This includes physical sales, non-DSP streaming, and social, fitness, gaming platforms, plus those expanded rights we just mentioned. Retail revenue is expected to outpace trade revenue growth, about 63% versus 57%, as DSPs capture more value from bundling.
And this is a signal that labels and legacy artist teams need to stop thinking of merch, touring, and branding as adjacent businesses and start treating them as core revenue lines as streaming growth flattens in mature markets.
Yeah, it also reinforces why subscription ARPU, that's average revenue per user, there's that stagnation we've been talking about. Spotify already flagged flat Q3 ARPU. and is pushing the industry to diversify rather than wait for streaming pricing to fix itself. There's a key quote in here from our friend Tatiana Sarasano. She's the VP of Music Strategy at Media. She said, "A growing fan economy is illuminating opportunities outside of traditional streaming."
Yeah, well, and $121 billion is a big number, but the more useful number is that expanded rights are outgrowing streaming, Jay.
Yeah, and this lines up with what we've been saying about that ARPU stagnation, right? If subscription pricing isn't moving the needle, the industry has to find growth somewhere else. Our next story is from Murray Stassen at Music Business Worldwide, and the headline is Spotify to label AI artists with new AI persona badge and keep the music out of recommendations by default. So Spotify announced on August 11th that it's rolling out this AI persona badge for artist profiles whose public identity may be AI generated. Starting mid-September, the badge appears on mobile artist profiles in search and in track rows across playlists for artists that have passed certain audience size thresholds.
Yeah, artists can self-disclose via Spotify for Artists, but Spotify will also apply the badge itself using human reviewers and AI investigative tools to catch photorealistic AI-generated identities that don't self-disclose. Music from tagged profiles is excluded from editorial and algorithmic recommendations by default unless a listener actively follows that persona.
Yeah, this is Spotify formalizing a distinction between AI as a creative tool and AI as, a fake human identity. And it's choosing to penalize the latter with reduced discoverability rather than removal. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Sam Duboff. He's Spotify's global head of music policy to break this all down for us. Let's listen in. Sam, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Of course, really happy to be here.
So Spotify just announced a new label for AI-generated artist identities, this AI persona. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we're really excited to finally get this out there. At the start of the year, we announced that artist identity and trust was going to be one of our very top priorities for the year. We've been busy. We can talk about a bunch of the things we've launched. Most notably, we kind of started in April with our new artist verification program, Verified by Spotify. That's about affirmatively authenticating real, legit, authentic human artists building real careers in music. That felt like the most important first place to start. This week, we've kind of announced the other side of the coin. We previously announced AI-generated identities aren't eligible for Verified by Spotify. Verified by Spotify is all about human authenticity. But we keep getting the same feedback from listeners, which is there's no feeling that's worse than when you start listening to music on a streaming service. You maybe think you like it, maybe you don't. Either way, you think you're listening to the artist that you're seeing visualized, and then only later do you figure out that's actually an AI-created identity. It's kind of uncanny valley, photorealistic images that can feel really misleading for listeners. So based on that feedback, we're rolling out this new AI persona badge. It's going to make it really clear to listeners that the artist identity that you see pictured there is AI generated. There isn't a real human who looks like that with that name behind the music. It's going to appear at the top of artist profile when you search for an artist in playlist rows. So if it was on a user playlist you're listening to, you kind of can't miss it. Our algorithms, our editorial playlists, they're optimized for elevating authentic human artists. That's where we want the opportunities to really flow to. And so by default, music from AI personas won't be in any recommendations. The only exceptions would be if a listener actively goes and seeks one out and they choose to say, follow the artist. We believe this sort of content consumers should be free to listen to it if they want to. They just should never be misled. So once it's clearly labeled, if someone's going to go seek out that music, they want to add it to their own playlist, they want to follow it, that's that consumer's choice. Where Spotify steps in is making sure no one's misled, that when you look at that profile, for sure it's an AI identity.
There are other platforms that are relying on self-disclosure. You're not doing that. You're using human review plus AI detection tools. What does that detection process look like?
Yeah, we're doing both. We, believe there's a big role for self-disclosure in general for artists and producers sharing how they're using AI. So starting, I guess this is now last week by the time your listeners hear this, our announcement was sharing that now through Spotify for Artists, any user can go in and proactively share that they're an AI persona. I hope and think there's lots of people who are doing this as a creative choice, and a lot of people already share it in the bio of their profile. This is just giving them an easier way to structure the information. But to make sure that consumers never feel misled, we don't want to just stick with self-disclosure. So we've staffed a global team of human reviewers who are going to take all sorts of inputs, manually review profiles that appear to be AI identities. And when they determine they're likely to be AI and not a real person, they're going to apply that label. So users are going to be able to report if they think someone's an AI persona. We'll use image detection. We'll use a variety of third-party audio detection tools. We'll look at, look on the internet and see the sorts of artists people are talking about online. We're going to go through, look at all the information about the artist, see if we can find record of them, existing offline, and then we'll apply that badge to tons and tons of profiles. And because we're going to be doing that, I hope that means that people who are creating these projects are just going to voluntarily self-disclose, because we're going to label the profile anyway. So it's a two-part system. Let people share, or if they don't, we have a team of reviewers that are going to quickly find and label any of these AI persona accounts, and you'll actually be able to see on the profile which it is. So if you're a listener, you'll see if an AI persona voluntarily shared the information, or if Spotify had to take the effort to review. And hopefully that makes a nice feedback loop where the artists are going to want to show that they're being transparent and upfront.
Spotify draws a line between an artist's identity, real or not, and how the music was made. Why keep those two things separate instead of maybe folding them into one disclosure system?
Yeah, we see identity and how the music's made as fundamentally different things. There's certainly a lot of overlap, but we have this AI persona system for identities and our AI credits system within our song credits for how the music's made. When it comes to how music's made, we talk to tons of professional artists, songwriters, producers who are human, authentically presented artists, songwriters, and producers, incorporating AI in all sorts of authentic and interesting ways. Post-production elements where you're using AI for mixing and mastering. Maybe there's an AI plugin to your DAW. I talked to an artist recently who their budget couldn't cover strings in their studio session, so they played a melody on keyboard and they used AI to transform what they played on keyboard into strings. Maybe they're using AI for a specific instrumental. Maybe a DJ is using an AI top line. When it comes to that sort of nuance, we have our AI credits system where we want to let artists authentically, transparently share how they're using AI. We launched that several months ago. We've been shocked and surprised at the amount of self-disclosure. I think a lot of conventional wisdom was that no artist would want to share that they're using AI. Instead, we're getting tens of thousands of AI credits every day, really solid percentage of total deliveries. So when we think about how the music's made, it really is a spectrum. All these use cases, and we want to get more granular. Artists are telling us they want to tell the story of how they used AI, right? If you just put an AI badge on a song, it's kind of missing the nuance of, is the entire thing AI generated, or did they transform keyboards into strings, or did they buy a loop on Splice and they didn't realize it was AI generated? Or a really common AI disclosure is synth, where they kind of use AI for a synth effect. And so with credits, we want to respect that spectrum. When it comes to identity, it is a little bit more clear cut, right? Either the artist profile you're seeing is the same as the real person you can talk to in real life behind the music, or the identity you're seeing is not a real person that you can talk to in real life. And streaming services like Spotify, we think, are in a position to make a determination about that from looking at the profile. When it comes to how the song's made, obviously the creative team are the people who know best what they actually did. There's third-party AI detection tools are good at some things, they're not great at other things. It's not always easy for a streaming service after the fact to tell from a finished file. When it comes to identity, streaming services can see how are they presenting themselves on Spotify. Does that person really exist? We can make a actual binary determination. So that's why we've separated those systems. And we think over time, listeners will see things differently. Is this a authentic human artist who has a really intentional creative process, who might be using some AI tools when they choose to, versus is this a synthetic identity that maybe some people will want to listen to as some sort of creative project, but that's going to feel like a real split from how listeners kind of think about how they engage with music.
Well, you make such a great point that I don't think gets covered enough, and that is that it's not as simple as just a song being created with a text prompt. There's this whole spectrum that you mentioned, all the way from that to maybe just a subtle tweak or a touch of an instrument or some mixing, mastering. And I like that you're covering that because there is that broad spectrum. So music from AI persona artists, they're not going to show up in Spotify recommendations by default. So why did you take that step?
Yeah, our algorithms, our playlists are entirely focused on creating connections between authentic human artists and listeners. We know our recommendations are a really valuable form of artist discovery. There's lots of music we could be recommending. We've been tuning our algorithms really for almost a year now to help elevate authentic human artists and to remove spam, slop, low effort content from our recommendations. This is just a next step in those efforts we've been making. AI persona badging is all about consumer choice and transparency. We think listeners, when they want to listen to music from AI persona projects, should have the ability to. If you go seek it out, you choose to listen to it, you choose to follow the artist. I imagine there'll be more and more artists who might use AI identities as a creative choice over time, where maybe there is an interesting creative project around an AI identity in the same way. There's been a lot of big Japanese hologram artists, or you think of a digital avatar band like the Gorillas in the past. So you could see a world where there'd be some AI persona artists that listeners are choosing to listen to. They definitely have the right to. When it comes to Spotify's role in recommending music to listeners, when they're playing Spotify programming, they're telling us they want to be introduced or recommended to music, whether it's new or familiar to them. We're taking a clear line. By default, we want that to be all about human artists with human identities. And that doesn't, personally, that aligns with my values, but it really is about what we see listeners wanting. When listeners use Spotify and they like a song in their recommendations, they take out their phone, they open they want to see who the artist is. And the Spotify we're building isn't one where it stops there, you see the artist name and that's it. Instead, we're building out all the world around the music. You're going to see the song DNA now, where it shows the songwriters, producers, session musicians that the artist worked with. You're going to see videos. You can see live performance videos or music videos with the artist's world. You'll see if they're playing a show nearby with our concert recommendations features. You'll hopefully see that they're verified because they're authenticated human artist. So we think when those sorts of artists are recommended, that's a way better experience for fans, where you take the phone out of your pocket, there's a new artist you can fall in love with and go see live and watch videos of. So that's part of the rationale too. We think that's a better experience for artists and fans alike.
A moment ago, you talked about how Spotify has made artist identity and trust a priority. Talk a little bit about Verified by Spotify, Song DNA, AI credits you talked about a little bit, and artist profile protection.
Yeah, we've been busy this year in this space. We're proud. Everything we're doing in the space, we're the only streaming service to have a feature like it. And we want to kind of keep leading the industry in these efforts the best we can. We're trying to bet big on human artistry. We fundamentally believe in the age of AI when, quote unquote, content, I don't mean music there, I mean social media content over your feeds. When content's so abundant and cheap to produce, listeners are going to be craving authenticity. We think the platforms that are going to win are the ones where you can get that human artistry and you can trust what you're listening to and trust what you're consuming. So that's why we've been so focused on it this year. Verified, I talked about a bit, all about making sure our listeners can trust who they're listening to, know there's a legit artist behind the music. Song DNA, we launched this spring, just reached 100 million users, which is tremendous. I don't think there's ever been a product that does a better job of celebrating the human creative process. It's entirely interactive. You click in and you can see every credited session musician, songwriter, mixing engineer, mastering engineer, studio tech. Click them, and then you can see, listen to everything they've done on Spotify across their body of work. You could choose 2 people, a producer and a guitarist, and see everything they've done together and hit play. So fans are loving that. Artist profile protection is a first of its kind feature to make sure that profile spam can't end up on artist profiles. Your listeners might have seen social media posts or press articles about it in the past year where AI slop can show up on profiles across streaming services because of vulnerabilities in the kind of open distribution supply chain that streaming is built on. It's been really frustrating for artists. Instead of waiting for an industry-wide solution, we are building within Spotify for Artists this tool. You turn it on, and when you turn it on, you get to review, approve, decline any track or release before it can go live on your profile. And so those are all in the kind of artist identity and trust space, the protections, but all the stuff that I'm sure you've been talking about on the show that are new features, we think of as part of the same strategy. Videos, concert recommendations, that picture I was painting of what we're building Spotify to become, where it's the whole world around the music. We see that as 2 parts of the same coin, right? It's protection, so authentic artists stand out and can succeed and show up authentically. And then once you have that foundation, let them introduce themselves to listeners in all these really powerful ways, whether it's videos or reserved access for live shows, and so on.
Sam, where can our listeners learn more, not only about AI personas, but Spotify policies on AI, artists, and music?
I'd say Spotify for Artists on social. That's all of our artist and industry facing content. Choose your platform of choice. We're on Instagram and TikTok and X and Threads, and we're even on Reddit now. So follow Spotify for Artists on your preferred platform. Best way to stay up to date on all these features and more.
Sam, great meeting you. Keep the music down. We're trying to work over here, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, demotion instead of removal is a smart move. It protects the user experience without picking a fight over what counts as real music. Spotify said listeners don't like seeing an artist profile that seems human only to find out that the persona is AI generated.
Right, and this all comes on the heels of the RIAA-IFPI voluntary tagging proposal we've been talking about, the majors chart eligibility principles, and that EU AI Act's deepfake labeling rules that took effect August 2nd, all referenced in this article as part of the same wave.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff. Our next story is from Steve Knopper for the Wall Street Journal. The illegal sellers costing musicians millions in revenue. So bootleg merch is eating into artists' income faster than lawsuits can stop it. And fans are pushing back on the crackdowns. With merch now a critical revenue stream in the streaming era, counterfeiters are estimated to be siphoning off roughly 15 to 25% of music merch revenue out of a market media research pegs around $14 billion in 2024.
That's crazy. So there are acts like BTS, it's Bruce Springsteen, Tate McRae, Benson Boone, Dua Lipa. They've all filed suits this year against bootleggers, and BTS won an injunction blocking counterfeit sales near a MetLife Stadium show in July. Amazon was also found hosting unlicensed Taylor Swift, BTS, Mariah Carey, Lady Gaga, which it pulled once it was flagged by the reporter. But artist reps say platforms are usually slower to respond to their takedown requests. Enforcement remains largely artist-funded, by security, tech firms, lawyers, since government action is really limited.
This is a direct hit to legacy and touring artist revenue at exactly the moment labels and managers are leaning on merch to offset streaming's unpredictability. Squarely in the wheelhouse of the heritage artist clients Jay works with, certainly. It also raises a rights enforcement burden question. Platforms like Amazon appear to respond faster to press inquiries than to artist takedown notices, which is a story in itself.
Absolutely. So I sat down with Steve Knopper, who wrote this piece for the Wall Street Journal. Let's listen in. Steve, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Jay.
I loved your piece on merch in the Wall Street Journal. I have to ask, merch is so essential for artists today, that income, in the streaming era. What kind of financial hit is the music industry taking from counterfeiting?
I don't know the exact answer to that. Nobody has an official metric to that. But the Wall Street Journal asked me to research that, and I talked to 4 or 5 different merchandisers, and I got numbers anywhere from it kills basically 15 to 25% of their revenue on a yearly basis. That's just throwing numbers out there, but it does seem to be a pretty extensive problem, and it is worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Let's look at the landscape. $14 billion in merch revenue in 2024. How does that compare to where merch sat maybe 5 or 10 years ago as a share of, an artist's total revenue?
I got that number from an estimate that was by Medea Research. I'm sure you know Tatiana Cirisano, or Tati, my former colleague at Billboard. And they put out a report in 2024, and that's where that 14 billion comes from. That was their estimate. And so the earliest number they have in this report is 2019. And I actually don't see the number here, but it looks like it's about 11, looking at the little bars on the graph.
Platform enforcement has been, according to your piece, has been pretty inconsistent. What did you learn about that?
So there's 2 types of counterfeit merch, or should I say unauthorized merch, merch that's being sold by quote unquote bootleggers who are not affiliated with the artist. They're not sanctioned. So the 2 types obviously are retail stores that you see online. And that means Amazon and Etsy, and also like web stores that some of these bootleggers put up. And that can get kind of sinister as well. But then the other thing is what we've been talking about, which is people who are selling stuff right outside the venue or near the venue. You have an AC/DC concert, you walk out of the concert, and then you see just streams and streams of people selling shirts for half the price that you saw inside the venue. And those are not authorized. And both of those ideas, both of those ways of selling unauthorized merch drive the artists and the promoters and everybody else in the legitimate food chain crazy.
Yeah, I've been a photographer for decades, and I've seen a lot of my work on Etsy, on anything from shower curtains, shirts, tennis shoes, but it's whack-a-mole. I mean, I don't know how you would police that, because you send somebody a cease and desist. Next week, they're up under a different name. It's got to be challenging.
Whack-a-mole is the phrase that literally every single source I've ever talked to on this subject uses. It is always whack-a-mole. So yeah, that is correct. In fact, the example I use in the journal article, which is one that Barry Drinkwater, the merchandiser who works for Global Merchandising Services and has been around for decades, he works with Ozzy Osbourne. And the example I gave was this Ozzy elf on a shelf that they discovered, that Jack Osbourne actually discovered last fall before Christmas. And, I kept pressing Barry, like, where did you find this? Like, where did Jack find it? I wound up talking to Sharon about it, et cetera, et cetera. And he kept saying, like, I don't know, there's so many of them out there. Like, they just keep popping up. And every time we shut one down, another one pops up, to the extent that, as you can see in the article from the photo that I took, I actually ordered one. And it was from a website, and it cost me $17, and they're all over the place. So
I want an Ozzy elf on a shelf, and but I want Ozzy's estate to get paid for it. But
right.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Some fans are framing bootleg or counterfeit buying as an act of fandom, or as a response to official merch being priced a little too high. Is the sort of Papa Roach 10th Street management thing that you that license, don't litigate model. Is that a viable option, do you think?
It is to some extent. I mean, you will undoubtedly be familiar with this whole discussion because it reminds me of the whole Napster discussion, right? Like it's like fans were saying, well, if they didn't charge us $18 for a CD with one good track, we wouldn't be stealing the music. I mean, so there's sort of like two sides of that argument. One is that is a preposterous moral argument. You can't just say I'm stealing stuff because it's too expensive. But on the other hand, I wrote a whole book about this, as you know, but on the other hand, like there's opportunity there. If the fans are doing this and this is behavior that's happening already, well, that's an opportunity to create an entirely new revenue stream in the business, which ultimately happened with streaming. So this is the same kind of thing. It's sort of like, you can't, I mean, if somebody's selling an illegal Aussie elf on the shelf, you can't just say, well, it's too expensive otherwise. But you can say, well, there's opportunity there. Maybe that's a product that someone else identified. Now we license it, we make it legitimate. So I don't know if that solves the whole problem. This is so widespread. It's all over the place. I think there's lots of companies that are now developing business models, core search and counterfind. They're using trackers online to identify this stuff and issuing takedowns. And some of this stuff is kind of effective. But it's hard to say, if you take it all together, that it'll stop the problem, because I don't think it's been going on for decades, and I don't think it's ever 100% going to stop.
By the way, your book, Appetite for Self-Destruction, remains one of my favorite music industry books of all time. I'm hoping at some point you dig back in and pick up where you left off. It's such a great book. Where can our listeners follow you and your work, Steve?
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it, Jay. You've always been a great supporter of that book. And by the way, I did do an update of it in 2017, which we've discussed. It's weird. We're in Open Road, which is a publisher of tech books, has picked up the book, and they're going to release that version with the updated chapter at some point this fall. I don't know the date yet. So that's why there's like this temporary lull where that updated chapter doesn't exist. Official stores, but that will be changed soon. But anyway, awesome. So thank you for bringing that up. But to answer your question, I was, as you know, an editor at large at Billboard for many years, but Billboard made some cuts, and I was one of those cuts in February. And since then, I've been writing for mostly about music and the music business, but other stuff too, in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, like this piece. I'm back writing a little bit for Rolling Stone, which is really nice and exciting to work with all those great people again. I've been writing for the Boston Globe. I have an LA Times assignment for the first time in my career. So I'm hustling, man. I'm on the freelance treadmill again, and it's a little nerve-wracking in today's age of no publications and people getting laid off and AI and all that stuff. It's all terrifying, but I seem to be getting a little bit of work. So
awesome. Keep up the great work, Steve. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jay. It's always great to be here.
Wow. 15 to 25% of a $14 billion market is real money walking out the door, and it's coming straight out of the pocket of the artists we work with.
That's right. This is mainly a legacy artist problem, but when merch becomes your hedge against unpredictable streaming revenue, counterfeiting isn't simply a nuisance, it's a direct hit on your business plan. And thank you, Steve Knopper, for breaking that all down. If you haven't read his book, Appetite for Self-Destruction, it's one of my all-time favorite books on the music industry.
Good book. Really good book.
Yeah. Our next story is a guest column for Music Business Worldwide by Music Infra CEO and co-founder Bjorn Lindvall. The headline is, AI is capable of breaking the music industry, but it doesn't have to. AI-generated tracks are flooding music platforms faster than royalty and attribution systems can process them, and that's the real threat, not creativity itself. I had coffee with Bjorn and Aileen Atkins, who's the Music Infra head of partnerships and music biz in Atlanta. Very thoughtful, very smart people.
Yeah, Music Infra CEO Bjorn Lindvall argues in a Music Business Worldwide op-ed that generative AI's biggest danger in the music industry isn't creative displacement, but infrastructure overload. He points to Deezer now seeing roughly 90,000 100,000 AI-generated tracks uploaded daily, a meaningful share of new music on the platform. Even though many are demonetized, they still flow through the same upload, processing, and attribution pipelines as everything else. Linval warns the next phase, small amounts of AI-generated material embedded inside human-made songs, will be far harder to isolate and attribute than fully AI-generated tracks.
Yeah, labels and rights holders depend on systems built for a simpler unit of consumption, streams, downloads, plays. But AI licensing deals now require tracking usage down to the token level and potentially billions of tokens needed attribution, back to the rights holders. So Linval's point, growth without infrastructure investment risks broken payment and eroded trust, a direct concern for distribution and royalty accuracy of all of our clients.
Indeed, if AI-generated content already accounts for roughly half of new uploads on platforms like Deezer, is the industry actually rebuilding its royalty infrastructure or just hoping the volume plateaus?
Yeah, that part actually worries me. It's what comes next. AI content embedded inside human-made songs. Fully AI tracks are easy to spot next to that. Our next story is from Mandy DeLugdug over at Music Business Worldwide. After Universal and Merlin deals, Spotify inks agreement with Cobalt for AI-powered fan-made covers and remixes. This is super interesting. So Spotify now has AI covers and remixes licensing deals with all three major publishers, Universal and Merlin, and now Cobalt.
Yeah, Spotify signed a licensing agreement with Cobalt on August 13th, covering its upcoming AI-powered fan-made covers and remix tools. The first publisher deal outside UMG, following the Merlin agreement from August 4th. UMG struck the original deal in May, covering both recorded music and publishing. The tool will launch as a paid Spotify premium add-on, though no price or launch date has been confirmed. Cobalt services over 1 million songs across 10 global offices and had already signed AI deals with 11 Labs and Udio.
Yeah, this shows Spotify methodically stacking publisher consent before launch rather than going live and letting labels opt in after the fact. Co-CEO Alex Nordstrom's 3Cs framework, consent, credit, compensation, is becoming the template for other AI licensing deals to get measured by. For songwriters and legacy catalogs, participation is opt-in. So this is a new potential revenue stream, but the mechanics, how multi-writer, multi-publisher songs get handled, that's still largely unresolved.
So the 3Cs framework, consent, credit, and compensation, is becoming the industry shorthand for what a legitimate AI deal looks like. Expect to hear that phrase a lot more this year.
Yeah, UMG, Merlin, and now Cobalt. Spotify's clearly not launching this tool until it has publisher consensus locked down first.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, it is time to wrap up the show. Boy, we do want to thank everyone for listening in. We certainly appreciate it. Big thanks to our sponsors, Hypebot and Bands in Town. We always appreciate their participation. If you'd like to advertise in the podcast and the newsletter, you can jump over to yourmorning.coffee for more information. Music is by our friends, the Licorice Quartet. And if you enjoyed the show, and tell one friend, Jay and I would certainly appreciate that. So on behalf of my good friend, Jay Gilbert, I am Mike Etchart. Thanks for listening in, and we will be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.